It's already been 6 months since I spent over $2,700 on this base model 16-inch MacBook Pro. Packed inside is the M1 Pro chip with a 10-core CPU and 16-core GPU, paired with 16 gigs of memory, and the only upgrade I made being to the increased storage in the 1TB SSD. Now, right off the bat, you need to understand this isn't a machine meant for the average consumer. The base M1 chip found in the Air is more than capable for everyday needs, but for creatives demanding more power for their workflow, this truly is a tool and an investment, one that's helped me to push out better content in my over 175 days of use. It's easy to feel pressure to go for the upgraded M1 Max chip with all the hype you see about it in the top of the line 16-inch, though at its price of over $3,500, it just doesn't make sense for most people when the M1 Pro is still crazy good. This truly has been the Mac I've always wanted, and I hope with this long-term review, I can help those of you who are looking at picking one up decide if it's right for you. When I bought this new laptop, my main goal was to replace my custom PC for creative work, and it's accomplished that 10 times over. Coming from a 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro, this is quite the upgrade. Now, this new Mac does still cost over $1,000 more than my entire custom build, which is rocking a 2070 Super and i7-9700K with 32 gigs of RAM, but they now serve two entirely different purposes for me. The MacBook is used solely for creative work, whereas the PC rig is now entirely dedicated to gaming. Every single video since my initial unboxing was edited on here, as well as I edit nearly all the photos I take within Lightroom and touch them up in Photoshop. Where Macs really excel when compared to most Windows laptops is their build quality. This thicker aluminum chassis looks super robust and, to be expected, feels premium. Looking at it, you'll notice that the feet at the bottom raise the Mac up quite a bit, and the vents at the back are very large. This allows for great airflow, meaning the fans aren't working as hard to push out air. Actually, in all my use, I don't think I've once heard the fans on, making it dead silent at all times. Though when doing heavier work like video editing, it gets really hot, and honestly, it's a little disappointing just how much it does happen. I appreciate the lower noise, but sometimes I'm alright if it gets a little loud so I'm not burning up my hands. Though in all seriousness, it doesn't get hot to the point of discomfort, though I would still prefer if the fans were on just a little bit so it wasn't quite as hot. Obviously, I went with the 16-inch, which has some heft to it at roughly 4.5 pounds. And you can see it barely fits in frame. That's why I haven't done much talking head this video so far. Unless, I mean, do you want me to? Yeah, okay. I'm sure you're wondering if I do regret going for this one over the 14-inch model. And the answer is definitely not. Performance-wise though, either model is identical, with the only real differences being the increased battery size and the screen real estate. For me, the trade-off in it being less portable is definitely worth it for the extra 2 inches of diagonal screen. I still find that it's very lappable and comfortable to use. I'm honestly super comfortable editing straight off the display and when working on programming projects for school, as it's so nice to have enough room for both my code editor and a Chrome tab without feeling cramped. You do want to make sure that you'll have a bag that's able to fit a device of this size, but luckily, while it is a tight fit, I've had no issues carrying in either my in-case or Peak Design camera bag. Lugging it back and forth to school hasn't been as hard as you think, but if you are constantly working on the go, and especially in tighter places like a car or a plane, then the 14 is most definitely the model to go for. I actually use the Mac in clamshell mode nearly 90% of the time, just throwing it into my Wooden Grove made dock, and it has no issues pushing dual ultra-wide monitors. Yeah, you heard that right. Come on, I mean, you can never have enough screen real estate, right? You could argue that it would have made more sense saving $200 and going with the 14, but I plan to do more work over the coming years straight off this display, so I am glad that I decided on it. I think that especially for people who will be working off the laptop itself the majority of the time, the 16-inch is definitely worth considering. But using the MacBook in clamshell mode paired with my Visuals mechanical keyboard and the MX Master 2S, it turns it into more of a desktop, which is the versatility I love to have. For the 10% of the time that I work on the Mac while connected to the display, I have 3 different panels to use, which is just wild. In addition to running the MacBook display itself at full native resolution, the M1 Pro chip allows you to connect up to 2 external displays at a 6K resolution at 60Hz, though I'm running both my ultrawides at 3440 by 1440, with the bottom being 160Hz and top 75Hz. But if you're even crazier than me and want to push 4 ultrawides, or it could just be like 4 regular monitors at that same 6K resolution, the M1 Max chip is going to be your go-to. For connecting to the displays, I'm using 2 different cables. One is the USB-C to DisplayPort cable for my main 160Hz panel, and the other is just a regular USB-C cable to connect to my secondary 75Hz panel. But with these 2 cables connected, it unfortunately just leaves me with 1 remaining Thunderbolt port, as Apple ditched the 4th in exchange for HDMI and MagSafe, both of which I don't really use. I was never crazy about MagSafe, to be completely honest. It's a neat feature, but one I'd personally be willing to trade for an extra Thunderbolt port since I'm almost always using the Mac docked, and my top monitor already provides power through USB-C. I overlooked this in my initial review, and after having switched to dual monitors, I feel now more than ever that 3 is just too little. If you plan on using more than one display and external devices, then a dock is pretty much a must. The HDMI port is a nice addition and is something I'm glad is there, just because it means you can connect to pretty much any display without the need for a dongle, but it's not HDMI 2.1, which is a bummer. Also, the picture quality to me just looks a little off when using the port, and I've had issues getting my monitor to run at the correct refresh rate with it. The options I get in the display settings are only for 50 and 85 Hz. But for me, the redeeming factor is this SD card slot, which is an absolute lifesaver when it works, because there's a 50-50 chance every time I plug it in that it just straight up won't recognize it, so I'll have to unplug it, plug it back in, and hope it does. Assuming all goes to plan though, having this port is so convenient, as I shoot all of my photos and videos on my Sony a6400 onto SD cards, and this makes the process of importing footage so much easier, as I don't have to go and find my dongle. This 16-inch mini LED display is one of the main highlights of this MacBook. It looks gorgeous with its peak brightness of 1600 nits, meaning that watching HDR content on here is just a joy. The blacks are crazy deep, and seriously, they're almost at the level of an OLED. There are some blooming issues if you're watching in a low light environment, and you can notice at times a little bit of a halo effect with the mouse at a dark background, but it's definitely not a deal breaker at all. When you're viewing non-HDR content or doing work, it'll have a sustained brightness of 1000 nits, which is still phenomenal, and next to my ultrawide, which only has a peak brightness of 400 nits, the difference is insane. The 3456 by 2234 resolution isn't quite 4K, but still makes everything on here look crystal clear. Pairing that with the 120Hz adaptive refresh rate, using this display makes everything feel buttery smooth. Honestly, after getting used to this, I don't think I can ever daily drive another device with a 60Hz panel. Colors on here look so good, but I've actually found that it isn't the best to use for color correcting my videos or photos, as the edit isn't consistent across different screens. These days, when it comes to making color adjustments, I do it all on my ultrawide, which is proven to be more consistent to what will be seen across most devices. Obviously, the notch is there, but in 6 months, I've had pretty much no issues with it. It's a worthy trade-off for the thin bezels. It makes for a 16:10 aspect ratio underneath. Once you get used to it, you just forget it's there. So, packed in a notch, you have this 1080p webcam that I'm recording off right now. Makes for a pretty good picture quality, and low light performance is not bad. Key light's off. The only light in the room right now is from these monitor lights here, and my face is still pretty clear, so that's nice. Audio, all being filmed on the MacBook Pro speakers. Pretty decent, I will say. And the only thing I would have liked to see is center stage, so that as I go side to side, it would make sense to crop in, but other than that, this is really impressive. I think having Face ID would have been a great addition, though Touch ID has been a pretty good alternative. It's super quick, and with the power button being larger, you're pretty much not going to have any issues hitting this key. This makes logging into Mac or using 1Password really convenient. The touch bar was removed in exchange for this top row of full function keys, and I'm really happy with this decision. I love having the ability to make quick adjustments to brightness, audio, media controls, and the Do Not Disturb key, which has been so good. I use that way more than I ever thought I would. The Magic Keyboard itself looks fantastic inset in this black anodized aluminum, and it makes it easy to see the letters with the backlighting. I really enjoy typing on here, and the travel is nice coming from the old butterfly switches on my 2017 MacBook. It's by no means a mechanical keyboard, but is still very nice for writing scripts in Notion or coding. On each side of the keyboard, you'll see that you have the speaker grills, which make for a surprisingly great sound. This is just one of those things that the Mac has always done, right? They're by no means a replacement for proper desktop speakers like my Audio Engine A2 Pluses, but they really pack a punch. They can get quite loud, and the sound is honestly super clear. It's great for when you're in a pinch and just need to quickly listen to something or watch a video. The 16-inch MacBook speaker grills are larger, so they will have a better sound overall. The trackpad as well is just phenomenal. There really isn't a single Windows laptop that even comes close to the Mac trackpad. On the 16-inch model, it's massive. I never found myself running out of room when performing gesture controls or just moving the cursor around. I actually like it so much that I went ahead and bought the Magic Trackpad so I can still use it when the Mac's docked in clamshell mode. I love it especially for quickly zooming in and out in Final Cut or Lightroom. As I said at the beginning, I really do think that for almost all pro workflows, the M1 Pro chip will really excel. There is still a part of me that wishes I went with the M1 Max for that little bit of headroom in my workflow, but honestly, it's just not worth that extra price jump when the M1 Pro is so impressive. I used to edit videos on my PC in Premiere, but once I finally got my hands on this guy, I switched over to Final Cut and have not looked back. With Final Cut being developed by Apple, it's much better optimized for their silicon than DaVinci or Premiere. This is the app I've used the most on here the past 6 months, and for anyone who's looking to edit video, this chip is honestly such a good option. My editing workflow definitely isn't anything crazy impressive, but I work with 2 layers of 4K footage. One is the talking head and another is the B-roll, as well as some music and assets. This chip makes my entire editing process go crazy smooth and is miles better than what I used to edit on my PC. This alone has made the investment into this laptop worth it, as I've been able to edit videos much quicker. Though the one issue I've ran into that just should not be happening on a $2,700 laptop is whenever I zoom in, the audio waveform preview just has to completely reload, which ends up taking a couple of seconds. This is super annoying when I just want to zoom in and make a small cut because I have to wait there for it to load back so I can see what I'm doing. But aside from that, the performance overall really has been impressive. Play pausing is nearly instantaneous, and applying effects like stabilization is a fairly quick process. With all the video editing that I do, I've constantly ran into the problem of running out of storage, and it makes me regret going for this 1TB SSD option. With each of my videos totaling to around 250 to 300 gigabytes in size, I just don't have enough room to edit on the SSD itself, which is a bummer because it is so fast. I instead have to connect to an external SSD that I store all the footage on, which takes up one of my precious USB-C ports, and now that I'm running dual displays, it doesn't leave any remaining ones. Because of this, I just cannot see myself buying another laptop with any less than 2 TB of internal storage. The 16 gigs of RAM in the base model is probably fine for most people, but I do find myself using up nearly all of it, as I tend to be a serial multitasker and have several other apps open while in an edit. macOS does a pretty good job at optimizing it all, but I would love to have that headroom of 32 at times like this. For photo editing, the M1 Pro is just flawless. Making adjustments in Lightroom and going over to touch up the image in Photoshop is seamless, and having the SD card slot makes the process of editing thumbnails and Instagram photos so easy. If you want a laptop just for photo edits, then without a doubt, the M1 Pro will be killer. One of the other things I've used this laptop for is web development and schoolwork for my CS degree, and it's been insanely good for it. But honestly, it's overkill for those two alone, and if I weren't creating content, then the MacBook Air would have been a much better option. Web development doesn't require a very beefy system, but with the 16-inch display, I get so much screen real estate to have open VS Code and a tab for Stack Overflow and YouTube. The GPU in here is honestly lacking, which for most creatives doing things like photo and video editing, it's not that big of a deal. With that said, it can actually do some light gaming with less graphic intensive titles like CSGO and Minecraft, being able to run at roughly 60 frames, making for a very playable experience if I want a quick break during an edit. Battery life as a whole has been seriously impressive. Worth noting is because I use my Mac docked most of the time, it's not something I'm really worrying about. But on days I'm working straight off the Mac, I can easily last an entire day or two doing lighter work like scripting or coding, whereas when I'm really pushing it with a Final Cut edit, I can expect to get roughly 4 to 5 hours, which is still insane. After 6 months, I'm sitting at a 98% battery health despite it being docked all the time. Luckily, with macOS, the machine runs off AC power rather than drawing from the battery, so there's no need to worry about it being docked full time. The M1 Pro chip though will actually have a slightly better battery life overall. It's not as powerful, but because of this, it's not drawing quite as much charge. Of course, the 16-inch model has a physically larger battery, so it will last longer than the 14, but not by a crazy amount, just because with the larger screen that has a higher resolution, it kind of evens out a little bit. So wrapping it all up, this has been my experience with the base 16-inch M1 Pro MacBook over the past 6 months. This really has been the Mac I've wanted for so many years. It's capable enough to power my entire workflow for creating these videos and replace my custom PC for everything but gaming. I really think that this base configuration is perfect for a lot of creators out there, and while the M1 Mac certainly has its place, this chip is no joke. At over $2,700, it's not a small investment, but it's easy to justify that price for my work because it truly has been a tool that's helped me to create better content. I don't regret going with this 16-inch model over the 14, but I wish I would have put down a little more money and upgraded the internal storage and memory to give myself some headroom. Though this is still a machine that will be more than capable for me until I plan on upgrading in about 3 years time. Apple truly has done something special here, and I am so excited for the future of Macs. With that, I've been Cole, and I hope this review was helpful to those of you considering picking up this laptop for your work. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below, but if not, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.